how much to charge in lawn care. But first, you should understand how much does it cost to run your business. Bam, $1,600 for a non-commercial policy for one old truck. Pow, almost $4,500 for commercial policy for two old trucks. Bam, $156 annual business licensing fee. Bammo, $70 annual filing fee with the Secretary of State. Pow, $1,200 for general liability insurance for a $2 million umbrella policy. And bam, $104 for a small tool insurance policy. And what if you have a full-time employee or maybe a couple part-timers or just a helper? Kapow! Payroll taxes, $19,000. That doesn't even include the wages paid of over $82,000. Pow! $4,700 for workman's comp. Bam! State unemployment for $3,600. And pow! $532 for Family Medical Leave Act. I paid over $10,000 in fuel and over $12,000 in repairs to my trucks and my lawnmowers. And oh man, don't get me started on all the other fees like my website, my uniforms, rent for the storage for the trucks, dump fees, supplies like weed eater string, oil, fertilizer and whatnot. And the list just goes on and on and on and on. So how much do you charge for your lawn mowing services? When you are first starting your business, it's hard to know how much to charge. This is my number one question when it comes to starting a new business. If you've worked for someone else, you kind of have a rough idea. But what if you haven't worked for someone else and you don't really have a baseline to start? It can be a little nerve-wracking establishing your pricing at first. You don't want to be too high because you're afraid you might not get any accounts. You don't want to be too little because the whole point in opening your own business is to make money, right? Last summer, I ran into a viewer here in town that struggled with just that. He started his own business, but didn't make any money, so he quit after his first year and went back to having a regular job. This is a normal thing to struggle with any kind of business. If you open up a coffee shop, you could use Starbucks as a barometer for how much to charge. Starbucks is kind of like the industry standard for coffee shops, so you'd have a pretty good idea how much to charge for a cup of coffee. But other businesses, such as lawn care, don't really have an industry standard. Lawn mowing services can vary greatly depending on the quality, pricing, and whatnot. So that brings us back to the question, how much should I charge? If you watch my previous videos, I talked about charging about $55 for a regular sized residential yard. I'm not going to split hairs about how big is big or what do I mean by regular size, because the pricing is arbitrary and it depends on how much of a pain in the neck is the property. You can have a big yard that is a piece of cake with large gates to get your riding lawnmower into the backyard, no shrubs to weed eat around, and have it nice and flat and with no stupid swales. Or you can have a small yard with a deep swale and a lot of shrubs to weed eat around, and generally the place is kind of a pain in the butt. You get what I'm saying. Think about your time, not the size necessarily. How long will it take to do? Do you have an employee or a helper to help speed things up? I think a question when first getting started is how much does it really cost to run a business? This is the more important question because without knowing how much it costs to run a business, you don't really know how much to charge. When I first got started, I made that mistake and I went about it the wrong way. I simply charged a price without even thinking about all the other things it was involved in running a small business. Let's take a closer look at the numbers I flashed on the screen at the beginning of the video. Yearly business license. You need to have a business license, $156. Every year, you must do an annual filing with the Secretary of State, and you must have insurance. Here's what I pay for an old truck non-commercial policy is about $1,600, but you really should have a commercial policy in place. Here's what I pay for two old used trucks, about $4,700. Now, before you light me up in the comments about how much I pay, keep in mind this is a commercial policy with multiple drivers with one or two minor fender benders over the years. And also, you must have general liability insurance with at least $1 million in coverage, preferably $2 million, and a bond with the city. Those will be about $1,500 a year for the general liability and the bond. I pay about $50 a month for a nice website where customers can pay their bills online through PayPal. Granted, you don't need a website when you're first getting started, but it sure makes you appear way more professional. Now, those are examples of some fixed cost just to get started. You haven't even started mowing yet. You don't have to pay all those costs up front. Most of these items offer monthly billing. Now think about how valuable is your time. Let's just use minimum wage as an example. Your time is way more valuable, but let's just do this for an example. Minimum wage is going up everywhere. By the time you watch this video, it will be upwards of $17, $18, $19 an hour. Let's just say $20 an hour, and then you have the extra costs that I mentioned, like the insurance. Now, we're not going to get into paying the payroll taxes because you can take an owner draw off the top. And you pay for that later in your taxes at the end of the year, but we're not really going to get into that. We're not going to get into the workman's comp because you don't need to pay workman's comp on yourself. And you'll be taking an owner draw off the top for some of your own personal expenses. Anyway, we're not going to get too much into the nitty gritty, but you have to also think about the cost of the fuel and repairs to your truck and equipment. Okay. Think about also your cell phone bill. I didn't even mention that. All right, so if you get all those kind of fixed costs involved, you're probably right into the $5,000–6,000 range for all your fixed costs just to run your business. So keep in mind, you have to pay for the entire's worth of insurance and fees, even though you only mow lawns for 30 weeks a year. You can't cancel your insurance policies the moment this season ends. Now, we have agreed that you must charge for your time, so the size of the yard isn't that important. It could be a huge yard that is super easy and fast to do with your riding lawnmower with virtually no weed eating, or it could be a pain in the neck and be a small yard with a lot of obstacles with weed eating for days. My advice is to think about how long it will take you and not necessarily how big the job is. You got to think about your expenses and then also profit for the business. You should be into the neighborhood of, at least $50 for your lawn mowing. I charge about 55 or 60 because my business is a little bit bigger than my first year getting started. And with a bigger business, your expenses go up as well. Also, I spent over $10,000 in fuel last year and over $12,000 in maintenance costs for the trucks, the lawnmowers, and fixing and stuff. And I spent about $5,000 in fertilizer and weed and feed. To keep this video short and sweet, when we're thinking about the lawn care pricing, think about all those other costs that it takes to run your business. When you're first getting started, you don't really know how much you'll spend on fuel, maintenance, breakdowns, or dump fees. But you should have a pretty good cost of your fixed items like your cell phone bill and your insurance. You should have that stuff nailed down. Your price must also include 3 ideas. So let's think about 1, figure out those fixed costs that we're talking about running the business, the insurance and whatnot. 2, mark up the pricing to include time for your own time. And then 3, mark it up again for the profit of the business overall. The whole point in opening your business is to make money. All right, let's break down a little bit more. Let's think about a general rule of thumb in pricing or in bidding is say 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. And what do I mean by that? The first third of the cost is the accounting for the cost of operating your business, like we talked about, the insurance, the fuel, the cell phone bill, etc. The second third should be the cost of your time or your employees' time or the total of hours worked. And the last third of your pricing should account for the business, right? I mean, your business should be making money too. So to keep it simple and for demonstration purposes, it would look something like this. Say you bid a job at, say, $100 or $125 per hour. Again, we're just talking about maybe you and maybe one helper. We're not talking about this giant business. So the cost of doing business for the hour is about $35. Again, because you got to pay for your insurance and your bills. And then the other $35 should go to yourself, straight into your pocket to pay you. And the last third should go into profit for the business. Profit to the business will be a savings account to buy a new mower, a truck someday, or save for a rainy day. Whatever, you get the idea. Okay, that might be a little too simplistic, but you get the point. 1, cost of doing business. 2, paying yourself. And 3, profit for the business. Pretty simple. All right. So when you first get started, money for yourself and money for the business is kind of the same thing. But don't make the same mistake I did and just take the whole thing and think it's for yourself and maybe not paying for the business or the expenses and stuff, things that you haven't thought about. So you get the idea. Leave a comment below if you have anything to add. I'm sure there are a lot of things that I didn't include that you feel are important. Let's keep the discussion going on through the comments section. Thanks for subscribing, hitting the like button, and we'll see you next time.